Well, guys, we already know one national championship representative. Who's going to be the other? We will find out tonight. What's up, y'all? It's Quinn Steven. I'm back with another YouTube video here with another version of the wild world of sports. Here to talk about first college football. Of course, we got that season wrapping up with the national championship race. Of course, the playoffs going on, the semifinals right now. We just had one result last night as Miami was able to top Ole Miss. And I said it in my preview, I said it in my short, it was going to be a close game and Miami's going to pull it out late by maybe a field goal touchdown margin. That's what they did. They pulled it out by 31-27 over the Ole Miss Rebels to advance to the national championship for the first time in well over 20 years, about 23 years. It was January 2003. That was the last time they played for the national championship. Obviously, we know Miami's the storied program, one of the storied programs in college football. So it is good back to see them back on the stage, even though their head coach would differ to say that they are back, probably until they win the national championship if they do so. But they will wait on the winner of tonight's game. That's going to be between Indiana and Oregon there at the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. And yes, if you missed out on that game, that Fiesta Bowl yesterday between Miami and Ole Miss, that was a instant classic. It was a lot like the Sugar Bowl game that Ole Miss did beat Georgia in the week before. But yes, back and forth. That was one of my concerns about Miami was I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to score enough with Ole Miss. Ole Miss has shown that they have an explosive offense with the Trinidad Chambers kid at quarterback, Keon Lacey at running back, and they had some good big receivers on the outside. So I figured Miami's defense was going to do a good job. I was kind of concerned about Miami's offense because teams played well, but they haven't put up a lot of points against Texas A&M and Ohio State. So I was kind of worried they would do that, but they showed up and they showed out. And they obviously proved with the acquisition of Carson Beck in the offseason, they really showed that he is worth the money. He is totally worth the IO money that he did get from the Canes, and he's led them to this point. He showed his experience, his guile that he got from the University of Georgia, playing for all those big games for Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs. That showed here for the Canes in a big way, and they really needed it. Now, I know a lot of people are going to talk about that last call. Ole Miss fans are going to just yell that that's pass interference all day. But you look at the replay, and when ESPN showed it the first time, they had the referee expert, kind of pretty much explained that there was contact on both sides, right? The Ole Miss receiver had his hands on the Miami defensive back had his hands on the Ole Miss receiver, and there's another two guys there in the vicinity of the ball anyway. So to be honest, it probably wouldn't have been caught anyway, and the ball filled out the end zone. So that would have been a tough catch regardless. Even if he caught it, probably would have been inbounds. So you kind of taking lumps with that. It's kind of getting yang of that. But Ole Miss played a great game, and they got a lot of guys coming back. Apparently, Trinidad Chambers is trying to come back. There's something in his closet saying that he may or may not, but he wants to. So they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the SEC next year. They had a great year this year, and the interim coach that stepped in for Lane Kiffin, he showed for sure that that's his job. That's his job to keep it up. And now we're going to tune in tonight to wait to see who joins them. It's the rematch, Indiana and Oregon. They had a classic up there in Eugene, Oregon about a couple months ago in October. I expect about the same thing this time. Obviously, both teams will score. Indiana's got a really good defense. Oregon does as well. It's not talked about enough. But they were great against Texas Tech last week in Oregon. So they're going to look to repeat that again. It's always hard to beat a team twice. But Indiana was so good this year. They're so physical, very well coached. So obviously, you can tell that's going to be a lot for Oregon to overcome. But I think they can do it. They almost did it the first time. If I had to choose, I think I'm going to go with Oregon and upset. Most people are choosing Indiana, but again, hard to beat a team twice. They got that explosive offense. Oregon does. If they let loose, it's going to be hard for Indiana to be able to come back and combat that as well. Because as good as their offense is, I don't know if it's quite that high-powered offense that can score quickly like Oregon can. They just have that ability. So I will go with the Dutch. So I think it's going to be the Ducks and the Canes a week from this upcoming Monday in the national championship. Interesting, that's going to be in Miami, so it's basically going to be a road game. So expect a lot of Canes fans there. Either team that shows up. I think Indiana fans will probably travel a bit better than Oregon fans will, but some Oregon fans will show up. But that's a long flight from Oregon all the way down to Miami. So gonna be a lot of Canes fans there. So now I'm going to pivot over to this madness that's going on with NIL, the transfer portal. So we had this story, and then obviously this is kind of the season that transfer portal has opened up. There have been some players whose teams are in the playoffs who are actually had to opt out and are now in the portal looking for a new school to go to, because again, we have to remember, I know everybody wants to say that college football is never going for pro football, but these are still college kids, and they're still going to school and all these other things. School, it's January, so now the second semester is now happening. So these players have to transfer as quickly as they can so they can enroll in school. They can't wait too long, even though I would pitch for in the future, maybe that they can hold off until after the college football season is over, which is going to be in about a week and a half anyway. I think then the portal should open. I don't think it's fair that we have teams that are in bowl games, that are in playoff games at that have players that's opting out. I don't think that's optimal for the success of college football. You have somebody who's a key player who's opted out because they want to transfer to another school. That can hurt a team's chances, which can in turn, in the long term, probably hurt some ratings in the future, because fans aren't maybe not be as inclined to see teams that they don't have certain players that are playing. So that's just one thing I would pitch for. I don't know how plausible that is. I don't know the logistics behind that, but that's something I would hope for. But nevertheless, that's not what we have right now, so we got to deal with what we have. And what we have are stories like Demond Williams out of Washington. Now, trust and believe this is far from the only story that you're going to hear about in college football, about players kind of pulling the rug out from other schools at the last minute, saying they're going here and then saying, nope, I changed my mind, I'm going to go somewhere else. In this situation, you had Demond Williams out of Washington, the quarterback, had a very good year for the Huskies. Huskies had a good year. And he decides to transfer even though he signs a contract with them, I want to say for about $4 or $5 million, somewhere in the whereabouts. And then he decides, I'm going to up and leave, because there's really nothing bound right now with these contracts that, okay, they sign them and then you have to go. Even though Washington was going to take this case to court if he went through with the transfer. He ended up not going through the transfer, and I think it was announced just today, or just yesterday, that he is going to indeed return. It's going to make for a lot of awkward moments in that locker room, I'm pretty sure, for Washington and for Demond Williams. And this is a story a lot of the sports news pundits and the sports news outlets are talking about now, because this is going to change, stuff like this is going to change the whole landscape of college football. We already have enough with the transfer portal and the NIL, but because it's pretty much a wild, wild west, and there's just no concrete rules behind it, because there's no concrete committee that's be able to regulate a lot of this stuff. These are the kind of stories that we're getting. This is the kind of stories that we're going to continue to get until something changes, because and I'm for players transferring. I mean, if coaches can up and leave players and their staff and their schools, and players should be able to do the same. And I'm definitely for players getting paid. That should have been happening the whole time. As much money as it's generating for the schools, but I do think there needs to be some regulation behind it. One of which was being what I said earlier about the transfer portal. I think it should be held off until after the season. Maybe schools can have a special exception for football players transferring to their universities, things like that. But y'all have to work out the future. That's just for me. But yeah, this is crazy stuff like this, where we have two people signing contracts and just going back on him. He could have got sued. He probably went back. Maybe he was to go back just to kind of drop the lawsuit, because that was probably the only one that was going to happen. But stuff like that is crazy. So, but he's back for whatever that's worth. So that's the situation with college football. Now we're going to shift things over to the NFL, where the playoff field is finally set after 17, 18 long weeks. We're finally here to this point in January, where one of the best times of the year is here. The NFL playoffs have started. I will be making another video on actual predictions for the playoffs. That should be uploaded pretty much right after this one. But for now, the playoff field is set. You have in the NFC, the Seahawks are the 1 seed, and then you have the Bears, the Eagles, the Panthers, the other division winners. Those are the 2, 3, and 4. And then 5, 6, and 7, you have the Rams, San Francisco 49ers, and the Green Bay Packers rounding out the field over there. Switching over to the AFC, you have the Denver Broncos as the number 1 seed. The Patriots are the 2, Jaguars are the 3, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the 4, and then the 3 wildcard teams, the 5, 6, and 7, you have the Houston Texans, the Buffalo Bills, and the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, while we're sitting there talking about teams that did make it, obviously one of the bigger stories is about the teams that didn't make it, that being the Kansas City Chiefs, who missed the playoffs for the first time in over a decade. Obviously, they had the Patrick Mahomes injury, tearing his ACL. They weren't doing that well before that when he was healthy. So there's that. Obviously, my Dallas Cowboys missed the playoffs yet again for the second year in a row, despite the trades and this and that. And they had a little run in the middle of the season, kind of flattened out and petered out towards the end. So they got the 2 first-round draft picks. Like I said, we're gonna have to see how they do with those. We're gonna have to see how if they re-sign certain players that are gonna need to be re-signed so they can make a big push next year. And then you have the Baltimore Ravens. So it was the last game of the regular season, Sunday Night Football, and it was yet another Ravens-Steelers classic. Went down to the last seconds. Lamar Jackson showed up and showed out, even though he was not 100%. He was still nursing his injuries from his leg, but he showed no ill effects in that game. Threw for 3 touchdowns, had some big throws, some big clutch throws that shut up a lot of the naysayers and a lot of the critics that have those sorts of things about Lamar, saying that he's not the most clutch player. I didn't see that on Sunday night. But Pittsburgh fought back. Baltimore had the lead. I think it was 10-0, 13-0 at halftime. But Aaron Rodgers made some big plays. The running game showed up for Pittsburgh. The defense starting to clamp down a little bit for them as well. And then the field goal game was on pretty much all night for both teams until the last couple of kicks. Baltimore, they missed a couple of field goals that really ended up being the difference, obviously. And then the last one just sailed off to the right. That was no good. And then Pittsburgh came back. They made their plays, did what they had to do, and then went down to the last play. And he just pushed it to the right. So there it is. The Ravens missed the playoffs this year. They had a lot of high hopes. Obviously, after last year, coming so close, beating the Bills or losing to the Bills in the divisional round, I thought they'd have been the team that made the Super Bowl last year. And that didn't happen then. Of course, you've had other playoff moments in the past. I made it short saying, hey, what's going on with this stuff with Lamar? Saying they may trade him and this and that. But after what they did after the game, I don't know if they're going to do that anymore. And the reason I say that is because they let go of their longtime head coach, John Harbaugh, who was there for 18 years, which is a super, super long time to be coaching any team in the NFL. But they let him go. Another disappointing result, another disappointing season. And that's enough. That's what they decided. So he is out as Baltimore's head coach. There's a lot of other coaches that got fired, as you usually see every single year. The Falcons let go of their head coach. The Cardinals let go of their head coach. The Dolphins, the Browns, the Titans. So many different teams going to be looking for new head coaches. We're already starting to see names circulate about who's getting interviews. Seeing Mike McCarthy, Jason Garrett, that's been floated out there. A lot of the names. You might see some of the coaches that got fired, like John Harbaugh. I see him getting another job rather quickly. But I believe the Giants will let go of their head coach as well too. So he could be a candidate for that job as well. But that's what happens in the NFL. You see that every year. Teams underachieve, this and that, and then that coaching carousel starts going round and round. So yet another offseason, yet another coaching carousel. And finally, let's get to the NBA, where we have a team in the defending champions, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who in the beginning of the season, you saw it in some of my other shorts and some of my other videos. We're talking about this team. Hey, are they going to be able to break that 73-9 record that the Warriors had set back in 2016? But over the last 10 games, they've kind of come back to earth a little bit. And it just kind of shows you that as good as the team is, it's just a long season. There's so many games, so much travel, so much this, so much that. That makes what the Warriors did in 2016 so incredible. Winning 73 games. They've kind of come back down to earth a little bit. They've been 6-4 the last 10 games. They had games like that ugly loss against the Hornets, which is just one of those inexplicable losses that even with the great teams, you're going to see that they had that blemish where you're just like, what in the world happened that night? That was just one of those for Oklahoma City. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. This is still the best team in the league. Yes, in the West, which is a very tough conference with the Spurs and the Nuggets. Even though they're dealing with Jokic being out for a while with that hyperextended knee. But, the Lakers and the Rockets, it's just a lot of challenges for the Thunder. I think they'll pick this stride back up. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with them. They're just kind of over the NBA season. I mean, here it is. We're over 30 games in, almost at the halfway point of the season. So, some teams it seems like those who are obviously looking towards the playoffs, obviously looking towards defending the championship run. They're just going to have moments like these. It's just too long to see. That being said, I will say this again, those young San Antonio Spurs seem to have their numbers so far this year. They've been 3 times already. They're second in the West, 26-11. They have Victor Wembanyama coming off the bench, I think, for precautionary reasons. He's had a little injuries here and there because he's so tall. It's not a great history with a lot of those really, really tall guys being able to hold up long term. So I think they know that they're trying to pace themselves. They're still winning that way. He's still putting up numbers when he does come in off the bench. They just beat the Lakers the other night. He had that double coming off the bench. Great defense. So those guys were rolling, and they do look to have Oklahoma City's number. I do think they're going to run into each other in the playoffs, and we're just going to have to see what does when it comes to that point. Slide over to the Eastern Conference, and it really hasn't been a whole lot of change from what's been at the start of the year. A lot of those teams that are kind of surprising right now are kind of still doing what they did earlier. Detroit's still at the top of the conference. Toronto's still at the top. The Knicks are kind of, they're doing well enough. I think they're kind of, I wouldn't say they're treading water. I think they're doing a little bit better than treading water. I don't know if they're at their best or at their peak or anything like that. They show flashes, but I think they're another one of those teams that's kind of looking towards the playoffs. Boston is surprising, though. I said that they would be a playoff team for the year, looking at the preview, but Jaylen Brown has really stepped it up this year, and he's shown he's not really a second fiddle. He's really a 1B or 1A switch off of Jason Tatum. He's really carried that team. They're doing very well right now. Obviously, they're very well coached. They have a great organization, so I wouldn't say it's a huge surprise, but it is a surprise given that most people say, hey, the best players out. We don't know how they're going to do. And then finally, guys, we got to get into this crazy talk about Trae Young being traded. So he got traded a couple of days ago from the Hawks, and it had been talks that he was going to get traded all year. And within the last week or two, it had already been reported that he, had been working with the Atlanta Hawks and trying to see if a trade is possible, see what's going on with that, because it was obvious and apparent that his future wasn't with Atlanta. They had kind of run its course. He'd had his run, and it's pretty much over. So they went with that understanding. He gets traded to the Washington Wizards, who've been one of the worst teams in the East, not only this year, but pretty much for the last decade, if not longer. A team that doesn't really have that many assets and pieces to really give to another team that they want to give away, because they do have some young draft picks and things of that nature. But they traded him to Washington for C.J. McCollum and Corey Kispert, and I believe another draft pick. That's about it. Everybody's just in uproar about this, because it's like, that was the best you could do. That was the best team that you could do business with. And it's happened pretty fast. So there's definitely some underlying things going on with that. Like, something in the water is not clean with the situation between Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks. I'm pretty sure now that he's gone, it's probably going to be a lot more that's revealed. I don't know if Trae himself is going to reveal it. He did have a post that he's posted on Twitter. I'll go ahead and put that on the screen. But maybe there's something cryptic in that post, I would imagine, that could allude to something that was going on between him and the front office and management with the Hawks and what have you. But very puzzling that this is the best that they can do. It seems to me like they just really want to get rid of him by any means necessary, and the first team that will take him off their hands, they say, hey, clean our hands, you can go on and go to better things. There are reports right now that Trey doesn't want to play for the Wizards, that he won't report. We haven't heard anything about him being in Washington, signing contracts, doing the press conference, the introductory press conference, or anything like that. So it remains to be seen if that's going to be the case. I don't know, but we have seen these cases before where players get traded to a team that they don't want to play for, and a place that they don't want to be at, and they just don't report. So we'll see what comes of this. This is pretty interesting news coming out of Atlanta. That's going to do it for this volume of Cool and Steve's Wild World of Sports. Again, stay tuned. I will be dropping my NFL playoff preview, or at least my wild card preview, coming up soon. If not today, it'll be tomorrow for sure. So stay tuned, look for that. But you guys could be anywhere else in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. Thank you guys so much for your support. Like, share, comment, and subscribe as always. Until next time, Cool and Steve.